last name.
Mr. Cameraman, are you having any challenges with your sound today?
No, sir.
Wonderful, wonderful. Mic's on.
Do I stand when the jury knows?
I'm sorry.
I would like to talk to you once before the day is out about tomorrow.
That's fine. I'm here all day,
Okay, thanks.
so I'll be here. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Make yourself comfortable. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Make yourself comfortable. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Make yourself comfortable. You may be seated in any seat. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Make yourself comfortable. Thank you very much for your patience. Come on out. Make yourself comfortable. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Make yourself comfortable. Technically, there are no assigned seats. You can sit wherever you want. I always tell ladies and gentlemen, if you want to sit on this side, come out first. You want to sit on this end, come out second. That way people don't have to crawl over you, but it's completely up to you at this point in time. You can move. You can crawl over each other. It doesn't matter to me. All right, lawyers, you may be seated. Ms. Hill, the witness is still with you.
Thank you.
Ms. Kelly Hill, I should say.
Okay. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am. You may proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Parker, during the break, did you have a conversation with someone in the hallway?
Yes, I did.
Was that Elizabeth Stansbury?
Yes, that was.
Do you understand that she is also subpoenaed to testify in this case?
Yes.
Have you been, you are a lawyer, aren't you?
Not a criminal lawyer.
But you're a lawyer?
Yes.
Have you been advised of the rule of sequestration?
No, I have not.
You have not?
No.
You don't know you're not supposed to talk to other witnesses
No,
while you're under subpoena,
I did not know that.
especially while you're testifying?
I was not aware of that.
But you did have a conversation with her during the break?
Yes, I did.
Are you aware of the fact that in addition to your friendship with the defendant, she was also friends with Ms. Shana Citron at the time?
Yes, I was.
You told us on direct examination that at some point you became familiar or aware of the fact that there was some tension in the home between the defendant and Rusty, correct?
Yes.
And believe you even said that there was an email exchange between the two of you, you and the defendant, about this tension?
Yes.
What's your email address? So I'm going to mark for identification purposes what I'll identify as State's Exhibit 98.
You may.
And if I might approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Yeah. Oh, first, let the record reflect I'm showing counts, so.
Yes, ma'am. You may approach.
Thank you. If you would, Ms. Parker, take a look at States 98. Tell me if you recognize the document, and look specifically, if I could just direct your attention to right there. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. That is my email address.
Okay, so your email address is reflected in States 98?
Yes, ma'am.
And is there also another email address reflected in States 98?
From, you're referring to the email from Andrea?
Correct.
Yes.
All right. So does State 98...
Since you mentioned one-on-one Andrew.
Andrea Sneiderman.
Right, go
Yes,
ahead.
thank you.
And does State 98 accurately depict an email exchange between you and the defendant, Andrea Sneiderman? Take your time and look at it.
When you finish reading, look up.
Yes. Okay. You're right. At this time, I would tender States 98 into evidence.
Mr. Clegg, any objection?
Object as to relevance, Your Honor. I believe she's certainly entitled to ask this witness about the contact and communication she had with Mrs. Sneiderman, but I see absolutely no reason why this particular document needs to be tendered. The question has been posed, were you aware of difficulties Mrs. Sneiderman may have had with her husband? She has said, yes, I am. I'm not exactly sure why this particular document is being offered, so I would object.
The court has not seen the document. Why is this relevant?
Your Honor, I could actually probably ask one question that might
You
make
can
that
ask me
clear.
as you wish. Well, in that case, for right now, I'm going to sustain the objection until you establish it.
Ms. Parker, in States 98, does it reflect the email exchange that you and...
I'm going to object because after having the document has been offered, the objection has been sustained, and now we're talking about what's in the document, so I object.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and sustain the objection. You want to rephrase your question?
Sure. Ms. Parker, do you remember on direct examination talking to Mr. Clegg about the exchange you and the defendant had regarding the lake house and whether or not she could go up to the lake house with Sophia and Ian? Do you remember that exchange on direct examination?
Whether or not she could go to the lake house? I'm
Or
sorry.
whether or not she could come with you to the event
Oh, instead of going to the lake house?
instead of going to the lake house?
Yes.
You remember that exchange?
Yes, ma'am.
And does States 98 reflect the exchange that you and the defendant had related to her ability or inability to go to the lake house?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this time, I do believe it's relevant, and I would tender States 98.
Mr. Clay, what's your position now?
I object again, Your Honor. She's certainly capable of testifying about it. She's on cross-examination. Why do we need a document when she's sitting here in front of us?
All right. In that case, I'm going to overrule the objection. You may publish it if you wish.
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Parker, if you would, on States 98, what was the date of the exchange you had with the defendant?
September 30th, 2010.
Okay. And the subject line, and the email comes from whom? To whom?
From Andrea Sneiderman to myself.
There's actually a subject line in States 98. Can you read it for us, please?
Mimosas for a reason.
Was that the exchange that you had with Mr. Clegg on direct examination?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Now, if you would, go further down the page and read for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury exactly what the conversation was that you had with the defendant via email.
Read the email.
Correct.
He only says these things to put it back on me. I'm not sure I have much of a choice but to go to the lake, which is what he wants. I have been told I need to give him that for now, and schmoozing with friends is not a top priority for the health of my marriage. Please do not forward this on. I know you understand. It is a rough patch right now for me. I guess I knew it was coming when I took the job, but not this bad. I will keep trying for the 16th, but I cannot push because it only ends in a fight, and I am tired of fighting right now.
Thank you. May I approach you on
You
this?
may.
So, Ms. Parker, in September, there was definitely tension between the defendant and Rusty regarding her job. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I believe you told us already, but back in September, do you know if she had at that point shared what was happening at work with Rusty?
I do not know.
And initially, you said she did not share this with Rusty, correct?
Correct.
And it was because she knew Rusty would go ballistic, right?
I do not know.
Do you remember talking to Detective Thompson? You remember giving
Yes.
Detective Thompson an interview?
Yes.
Do you remember talking to Detective Thompson about this very subject?
I do not.
Do you remember telling Detective Thompson that you advised her not to tell Rusty because she knew Rusty would go crazy?
I do not recall.
Okay. But you do know that if she had told Rusty, it would have been career-ending for her.
If she had told Rusty it would be career-ending for her?
Correct.
I don't remember.
All right. If she told HR, it would be career-ending.
It would be
Correct.
career-limiting.
Career-limiting. And if she told her husband, he would make her quit the job, wouldn't he?
I don't know.
Now, when you had a conversation with the defendant about her boss, did there come a time when she told you that her boss had finally made a very clear expression of his feelings for her and that she shut him down? Do you remember that conversation?
Yes.
And she told you that when he finally came out and told her the way he felt and she shut him down, it was like the tension had been removed.
Yes.
The situation had been resolved.
She actually did not say resolved. She just In fact, she said the opposite. She said that it wasn't necessarily resolved, but that the air had been taken out of it.
Okay, so the air had been taken out of it. It was flat.
It was better.
It was better. And in fact, after that conversation where the air had been taken out of things, you really didn't hear anything else from the defendant about her boss, did you?
I did not.
You didn't hear about any other contact she had had with him that made her uncomfortable, did you?
I did not.
You did not hear about anything related to the trip she was taking with her boss after that point that concerned her to the point that she had to talk to you about it, did you?
That's correct.
And do you remember when you had the conversation with her about the air being taken out of the relationship between her and the boss?
It was before that trip out west.
So that would have been early on.
Yes,
in her
ma'am.
employment with GE.
Yes.
So after, say, July, because I think you told us that conversation was either late June or early July.
Yes.
After early July, you heard nothing else about the boss, correct?
Correct.
And in August, you heard nothing else about the boss, correct?
Correct.
In September, you heard nothing else about the boss, correct?
Other than they were friends.
When you did have a conversation with the defendant early on, and you did discuss with her how to handle the discomfort she was having in the relationship with the boss, you kind of helped her come up with a plan. Is that correct? On how to deal with his actions?
Yes.
And I think your plan was to pretty much come up with excuses for why she couldn't do anything outside of work. Is that correct with him?
That's the gist.
Kind of keep your distance, correct? Keep her distance from him, correct?
You can't really keep distance from a boss, but
You're right. Let me rephrase the question. To deal with him only as it related to work, correct?
mostly. Really, we were dealing with travel together.
Right. And you gave her advice when it came to traveling, correct?
Yes.
And you really thought that you had kind of helped her develop a plan to deal with this very uncomfortable situation she was having with her boss when they traveled together.
I don't know about that, but I did pass along ideas based on my limited research.
And your ideas, did they include taking long walks together?
No.
Did your ideas include holding hands?
No.
I'd like to, if I could, show you what has already been admitted into evidence at State 16. Mr. Pasquale, if you could publish that for us, please. Take a look at State's...
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
We're going to blow it up for you, don't worry. Okay. In State 16, do you see the link to, I guess, a flower, send flowers?
Yes.
You see that link? And are you able to look at State 16 and actually see from whom that email was sent?
Yes, thank you.
Are you able to see
Yes.
who sent that email?
Yes.
Who sent it?
Hemi Newman.
And is Hemi Newman the person you knew to be the defendant's boss?
Not at the time, but yes.
But you now know?
Yes.
Okay. In the email from Mr. Newman, to whom was that email sent?
Andrea Sneiderman.
So in the email from Mr. Newman to the defendant, there's a subject line. What does it read?
From Mr. Newman to Andrea Sneiderman? I don't know which
The
is...
subject line.
Oh, the subject line. Open when you get in the room.
Okay. And when we saw the hyperlink there to the roses, would your plan have included opening an email where her boss was telling her that he was trying to send her roses to her hotel room?
No.
Now I want you to look up to the answer that the defendant sent to her boss. Can you see that there? It's on the top.
Yes, ma'am.
Read what it says.
So thoughtful and sweet, I knew you might try something like this. Talk to you tomorrow. I am joining I have no idea.
Well, I really want to focus on the first sentence.
Gotcha.
So thoughtful and sweet.
Yes.
Was that part of the plan that you discussed with the defendant?
No.
If we could publish what has already been admitted as States 20 into evidence. Are you able to see that, Ms. Parker?
Not even remotely.
I understand. Can we blow that up a bit? Start from the bottom. Okay, move up some. Sorry. Yes. Are you able to see, Ms. Parker, the email? And again, this has been already admitted, so I'll just tell you this is an email from the boss to the defendant. Read, if you can, the sentence that's reflected on the scene. It's on the screen from the email.
It was supposed to be a paper they were supposed to leave in your room with the chocolates and flowers.
Would your plan that you gave to the defendant include accepting chocolate and flowers in your hotel room from your boss?
No.
Now, if you could go up to the, yes. More. Okay.
Next question.
Yes, Judge. Ms. Littman, if you would, take a look at the screen and tell
Parker?
me, I'm sorry, Ms. Parker, take a look at the screen and tell me what the email is from the defendant's boss to her along that same trip in July of 2010.
Read the email?
Yes, please.
No, very serious. That was the 20 phone calls I referred to. The receptionist called me the last great romantic. I'll tell you what the note was supposed to say before we hang up later.
Okay. And if we could see the defendant's response, please. Please read it, Ms. Parker.
But I thought it maybe did not work out. Romantic for sure. Talk to you in a few.
And when it says talk to you in a few, do we have a time on that email?
12:53 a.m.
Okay. So would your advice to the defendant have been telling her boss that his gesture of sending a note, chocolate, and flowers was romantic for sure?
No.
Would you have advised her to call her boss in a few when he sent her an email at 12:53 a.m.?
That's a different question.
Well, and it calls for a different answer.
Could very well have been within the plan or outside of the plan, as you call it.
The plan?
I don't believe that the time of day has any relevance.
Okay. Well, how about this? When you tell him that it was a romantic gesture of sending flowers and chocolates to you, and then say, I'll talk to you in a few minutes, would that have been advice you would have given the defendant in the plan to avoid any uncomfortable situations with her boss?
Again, the time is irrelevant. The subject of the substance of the email is not part of what we had discussed, but the time is irrelevant. And
the subject of the email would not have been an appropriate topic that you would have advised the defendant to have a conversation with her boss about. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I understand.
Would you have felt, when you were giving the defendant advice about what to do and what not to do as it related to her boss in this uncomfortable situation, would you have advised her to have an exchange like this with her boss about chocolates, flowers, and a note being delivered to her hotel room?
Certainly not about the chocolates and the flowers.
Okay. You told us, Ms. Parker, that after the air had been let out of the relationship, you really didn't hear anything else about the defendant's relationship with her boss, Hemi Newman, correct?
Correct, other than they were friends.
Other than they were friends. Is it fair to say then that she did not share with you that the two of them had an email exchange where she told him that she felt that she had betrayed everyone she cared about?
That is correct.
I'm sorry. I didn't hear the answer, Judge.
Well, would you repeat your answer?
That is correct.
She didn't share that with you.
Correct.
Did she share with you the fact that she didn't know how she was going to live with herself any longer because of what she had done?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to object to that question. The witness has been asked about whether or not she heard about further communication or contact between Mrs. Sneiderman and Mr. Newman. She said, no, I did not. In light of that answer, I don't see any reason why what would be relevant is what she did not hear. So I would object.
I understand. Response?
Well, Your Honor, I am not asking her at this juncture about any contact she had with the boss. What I am asking her are very specifics, whether or not the defendant shared with her her own words that she relayed to the boss. Nothing about what the boss was doing with her or to her that made her uncomfortable, but whether or not she had shared her own words with this witness.
Ms. Clegg?
What is the possible relevance of that, Your Honor?
Yeah.
Whether it has been shared with this witness or not?
Response? Why
Your
is
Honor,
that relevant?
Your Honor, I believe it's relevant because the witness has just testified that the defendant said that they were only friends. And this clearly shows that that's not true. It contradicts the testimony.
I'm going to overrule the objection for right now. Go ahead.
Do you recall the question, Ms. Parker?
I do not. Would you mind repeating?
No, not at all. Did the defendant share with you the fact that she told her boss that she didn't know how she was going to live with herself any longer because of what she had done?
She did not.
Did she share with you the fact that she felt like she had to now repent for the rest of her life because of what happened on one of her business trips with the boss?
She did not.
May I have 1 second, Your Honor?
You may. Take as much time as you need. Ms. Carpenter, we're back on the record. Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, I have no further
All
questions.
right.
Thank you.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor. I have no other questions. May Ms. Parker be excused?
Any objection?
None from the
All
state.
right. Ms. Parker, you're excused. Have a good day. Drive safely.
Thank you. Does excused mean released completely?
Excuse me for right now, yes.
As in barring contact?
Well, that's a different question. At this point, normally I don't exchange in question and answer with witnesses. What I'm going to say, you may step down from that witness stand and walk aggressively toward that door.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Call your next witness.
Defense calls Donald Robinson. Can I step out?
Yes, sir, you may. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you stand and relax. Thank you for your cooperation. It's always important for everyone to be alert and attentive throughout the entire process, make sure everything is heard. You may be seated. Come on up, young lady. Mr. Garrett, if you would.
Turn around, raise your right hand. You solemnly swear in front of the testimony you give this course, should be true, whole, the truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Donna Formato.
Okay, Mrs. Formato, please speak up so all members of the jury will be able to hear you, okay?
Please
Yes,
spell your
sir.
name for the record, please.
Donna,
Yes, sir.
Donna-Formato.
Thank you. She's with Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Mrs. Formato, where are you employed?
Dunwoody Prep,
And how long have you been so employed?
16 years.
And what are your duties and responsibilities at Dunwoody Prep?
Running the school, working with parents, the children, the staff, keeping things together.
And do you have a title?
Director of Administration.
Can you talk up just a little bit, young lady?
Director of Administration.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
sir.
And calling your attention back to November 18th, 2010, were you at Dunwoody Prep in Dunwoody, Georgia on that day?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What time do you typically get to work?
About 7:15.
Okay. And were you present when there was a shooting that occurred on the premises?
Yes, sir.
If you would, please tell His Honor and the jury in your own words what you observed that day. And let me explain to you, do not go into what other people told you, but what you observed, okay?
Okay.
And you may begin.
Can I ask, when you mean that day, like what occurred?
On November the 18th, what did you see regarding the shooting? And then I may have follow-up questions, okay?
Okay. I had gone outside and I saw one of our parents outside laying on the ground, and he had been shot.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question. Did you know that parent?
Yes,
And what was that parent's name?
Rusty Sneiderman.
Did you know his wife, or do you know his
Yes,
wife?
Andrea.
Do you know them because of the professional relationship with their school, or do you have contacts with them outside the school?
Professional.
Okay. You had seen Mr. Schneiderman there before.
Yes,
Okay. And when you say gunshots, how do you know there were gunshots?
I could see them.
And what do you mean, see them? You could see them on his body?
Body, correct.
Okay, so you were pretty close to Rusty.
Yes.
How close did you get to him?
About maybe not even a foot.
Okay. Was there anyone else with you?
Yes, Neely Tugwell, or Height at the time.
I'm sorry, who?
Neely, Height, correct.
Great.
To the best of your ability, were you the first two employees of Dunwoody Prep to get to Rusty?
Yes.
What, if anything, did you do after you saw Rusty on the ground?
I went inside with Neely and tried to figure out at first, because I wasn't sure who the parent was, trying to identify him. And we had talked, Neely and I, and discovered she knew who it was.
Did
And we
anyone
made-
call 911?
No, we did not, because other people had already.
Okay. Were police officers there when you got to Rusty?
No,
Okay. Were first responders, such as fire truck or ambulance?
no,
Were you there outside when the first responders got to the scene? And if you don't recall, that's fine.
no, I do not remember.
Okay. So you went back inside the location.
Correct,
You figured out who the parent was.
yes.
And then what did you do?
I got the emergency contact to call Andrea right away.
And did you know, again, Andrea prior to November 18th?
Was parent of the school?
Yes. Okay.
Yes,
And there's contact information provided. You called her.
correct.
And exactly what did you say to Ms. Snyderman?
I said to Andrea that she needed to come to the school right away. Something's happened. Ian was fine because I was worried about her driving over, and told her to come as soon as she could to the school.
So you let her know that her son was fine.
Yes, correct.
Did you let her know anything about why she needed to come to the school then?
I said something's happened at the school, that she needed to come right away. I didn't say any more than that, just because I was worried about her driving, and I really wasn't sure what to say, and how do you say anything to anybody that you know of something so tragic and awful.
Did Andrea say anything in response?
She kept repeating herself, "Tell me what's happened, tell me what's happened." And I just kept repeating, "You need to come to the school as soon as possible."
Did you mention Rusty's name, or did she mention Rusty's name in that conversation to the best of your ability?
No.
That she didn't mention
I
it,
don't
or you don't
remember.
recall?
I don't recall.
You don't recall? Okay. Did she, in fact, come to the school?
Yes.
Did you have a conversation with Mr. Sneiderman that day?
Yes.
Okay.
Third option, not to answer your question directly, is that
I wouldn't expect you to.
Say B30?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
May I approach you?
You may.
What is the Dunwoody Prep phone number?
770-396-2973.
Now, let me back up. Were you present when Jane Newman talked with Mr. Sneiderman? Were you in the office, or do you remember?
I do not remember. It might have been possible, but I don't remember.
Okay. But you distinctly remember talking to Mr. Sneiderman?
Yes.
Oh, well, did you initiate the call, or did he initiate
I
it?
called him
And how did you know his number?
because there were several messages left from Rusty's father.
He had left messages.
Yes.
Do you know whether these messages were before or after he talked with Miss Newman? And if you can't recall...
It might have been either way. I'm not certain.
Okay. Do you recall the time that you returned the call to Mr. Sneiderman?
Maybe about 9:45 or a little later.
Okay. So what's previously been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 30.
30, yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
I said yes, sir. 30.
Thank you, Judge. If your number is 770-396-2973, and Mr. Sneiderman's is identified as 216-464-4260, do you see about the time that you returned the call?
Yes, I see it.
And does that refresh your memory as to approximately what time?
That does.
Okay.
Sounds about right.
When you returned the call to Mr. Sneiderman, was anybody in the office with you?
I don't remember.
Were there any males in the office with you?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you remember whether or not you knew where Rusty had been taken for emergency treatment?
No, I do not.
All right, let me rephrase the question. Were you aware whether he had been taken, or you don't remember?
I wasn't aware that he had been taken.
So at the time you called Mr. Sneiderman, you were not aware of where Rusty had been taken?
No.
Okay. And when Mr. Sneiderman, when you called Mr. Sneiderman, what, if anything, did he ask you?
He had asked how many times his son had been shot and if he needed to either drive or fly, if he needed to get there as soon as possible. And I said, you need to come as fast as possible.
Do you recall anything else about the conversation?
No. I don't remember anything else.
Do you recall, yourself or anyone else in the room, tell Mr. Sneiderman where Rusty had been taken?
No, I don't remember anybody saying anything.
Okay. Again, anything else about that conversation that you recall?
No.
Well, let me ask this. The conversation with Mr. Sneiderman, was that before or after you were in the room with Sergeant Cordelino and Andrea? You don't recall, that's not.
I'm not sure.
Were you present in the room when Sergeant Cordellino was talking with Andrea?
Yes.
Do you remember what, if anything, Sergeant Cordellino asked Andrea about her husband?
I remember him asking if he had any enemies or if somebody would want to hurt him.
Okay. Those were questions that you recall the sergeant asking Andrea.
Correct.
What was her demeanor during that time?
She was hysterical.
And do you recall whether or not Sergeant Cordellino, after asking her those questions, told her what had happened to Rusty?
I don't remember.
Okay. You do recall him asking her, however, whether or not...
Objection, Your Honor, that's a leading question.
I'm going to sustain that objection.
Okay.
You want to rephrase that question?
What did Andrea ask Detective Cordellino after she was asked by the sergeant whether or not anybody would harm her husband?
Andrea's response is she couldn't think of anybody, that they had any enemies, or that anybody would want to hurt them or their family.
Okay. Do you recall whether this discussion was in a vacuum or whether or not anyone was discussing what had happened to Rusty?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
That wasn't a very articulate question. You don't recall whether or not during that conversation what Sergeant Cordellino said to Andrea, correct?
Correct.
About what happened to Rusty.
Correct.
Do you recall a conversation with Elizabeth Stansberry the following day at Dunwoody Prep?
No, I don't remember.
Do you recall telling Ms. Stansberry?
Objection, Your Honor, what she just said, she didn't remember a
I'm going to
conversation.
sustain that objection, Mr. Moore. You have to rephrase that question.
Do you have a conversation with Ms. Stansberry about what you had heard and observed the day before?
It is possible.
Okay. Do you remember, do you know who Mark Potter is with the District Attorney's Office?
Yes.
Do you remember having a conversation with Mr. Potter on May 31st, 2011 about what you observed and heard that day regarding the conversation between Sergeant Cordellino and Andrea?
Yes.
And did you tell Mr. Potter?
Objection, it's a leading question.
I haven't even asked the question yet.
It started, did you tell?
Well, Mr. Moore, I mean, you're correct. You have not asked the question yet, but it's starting out, because obviously it's starting out as if it may be a question that may suggest the answer. And obviously, the lawyer is making the objection to prevent it being said. Let me just direct you to do this. Ask a non-leading question. That's a question that does not suggest the answer. You can ask whatever you want to, but she's on direct.
She is. Did you have a conversation with Mr. Potter on May 31st at Dunwoody Prep?
Yes.
And what was that conversation relating to?
The shooting at Dunwoody Prep.
Okay. And did you have a conversation about the conversation that you observed between Sergeant Cordellino and Ms. Snyder?
Yes.
And your memory on the day after shooting, was it better then or today?
My memory would have been better that day than it is today.
Okay. And your memory on May 31st at Dunwoody Prep 2011 when you talked to Mr. Potter, was that better then or today?
It would be better that day, not today.
Okay. No further questions at this time.
All right. You may cross-examine if you wish.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Camato.
Good morning. Afternoon.
My name is Anna Cross, and we haven't met, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And I wanted to make sure I understood what you're saying. Your testimony here today was that when you initially called Andrea Sneiderman on the phone the morning of November 18, 2010, you did not tell her that her husband had been shot at that time. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And you very deliberately didn't do that?
Right, I did not tell her.
Okay, and you said your reason. Can you tell us what the reason was that you didn't tell Ms. Sneiderman on the phone at your first contact with her that day that her husband had been shot?
Because I was concerned of her driving to get to the school.
And did you have concerns about her safety?
Correct.
Okay. Telling her such upsetting news on the phone?
Right.
Okay, all right. And you're clear about that?
Yes.
Okay. The rest of the day's events, are you as clear?
No.
Okay, all right. And you've been asked a lot of questions about the sequence of events that day, is that right?
Correct.
Today you've been asked a lot of questions?
Yes.
And you testified in a previous trial with the state versus Hemi Newman, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and you were asked a lot of questions at that time?
Yes.
Okay. And you've been interviewed several times, is that right?
Yes.
People from the district attorney's office?
Yes.
Mark Potter in particular?
Yes.
And you spoke to the defense several times about these same issues, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And lots of people are asking you about what your recollection is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And your testimony here today under oath is that you don't specifically recall the content of any conversation that you had with Andrea Sneiderman after that first initial telephone call, is that right?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
I will, yes. Your testimony here today is that you can't recall the specifics of any of the conversations you had with Andrea Sneiderman on the day of November 18, 2010, after that first initial phone call.
Some of it I remember, some of it I do not.
Okay, all right. And you do not remember telling her at any time during that day that her husband had been shot, is that right? That's your testimony today?
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
Yes. Do you ever recall telling Andrea Sneiderman when she was at the Dunwoody Prep Daycare on November 18, 2010, do you recall telling Andrea Sneiderman that her husband had been shot?
While she was at the office?
While she was at the office.
It is possible, but I don't recall that I had mentioned that.
You don't recall that you did that? That's what I'm asking. I'm asking
Correct.
for your recollection. Your recollection, you have no recollection of telling her that. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And as you sit here now, sworn and under oath, you have no recollection of anybody else telling her that Rusty had been shot in your presence. Is that correct?
It is possible somebody did. I just don't remember.
And that's what I'm asking for. I'm just asking for your recollection. As you sit here now, do you have a recollection of anyone telling the defendant that her husband had been shot during the time she was at the daycare center that day?
Yes.
You have a recollection of it now?
No, that what you were saying, I'm answering your
Okay,
question.
I'm going to answer.
I'm agreeing with you, sorry.
I understand. I understand. Are you nervous about being here today?
Absolutely.
Okay. This is not where you want to be.
Correct.
All right, that's fine. I understand. Just listen to my question, please, and please try to answer it. As you sit here now, do you have any recollection of anyone telling Andrea Sneiderman that her husband had been shot during the time she was at the Dunwoody Prep Daycare that day?
No, I don't have any recollection that I can remember.
Okay, and that's all I'm asking. Thank you, Ms. Cremona.
Any redirect, you may?
As to your recollection, do you have a recollection of telling Mark Carter of the district attorney's office about anyone telling Andrea her husband was shot?
Objection. I'm going to object to the leading nature of that question.
Okay. So,
Well, see, the lawyer's approach, overruled, you can ask that question.
Mrs. Romano, do you have a recollection of telling Mark Potter from the district attorney's office whether or not you observed anyone telling Andrea her husband had been shot? And Mr. Romano, let me just say, if you
Well,
don't,
let
that's...
her answer the question. Don't, I mean, you asked her the question, she has the right to answer. Go ahead, if you can.
I'm trying to think back with our conversation. It's so hard to remember. I'm sure it's possible, but so much has happened since then.
If you can't answer the question, it's fine, Mrs. Famato.
Okay. I don't remember.
No
I'm sorry,
further
I'm
questions.
sorry, you said you don't remember?
I don't remember.
Thank you, Judge. No further questions.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Lawyers, may this witness be released and excused from her subpoena? Do you want to?
Maybe release from defense, Judge?
Any
Yes.
objection?
No objection
All
from the
right.
state,
You're
Your
free to
Honor.
go, young lady. Have a good day. Drive safely.
Thank you.
All right, next witness.
Your Honor, the defense would call Elizabeth Stansberry to the witness stand.
You may. And ladies and gentlemen, while we are, take photographs of that. Come on up, young lady. Follow the instructions of Deputy Garrett. Please.
Turn around, raise your right hand. You solemnly swear affirm that the testimony you shall give this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, that you got. You may be seated. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Elizabeth Stansberry. My last name is spelled Stansbury.
You may proceed, Mr. Clegg.
Ms. Stansberry, do you know the defendant in this case, Andrea Sneiderman?
Yes, I do.
Do you see her seated here in this courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
Could you point her out and describe what she is wearing, please, ma'am?
She's wearing a green sweater and a print shell under it.
And may the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant.
Record may so reflect.
Okay. How long have you known her?
I first met her when our children were in pre-K together in 2009.
When you say pre-K, where would your children have been at pre-K together at that time, ma'am?
Dunwoody Prep.
So how many kids do you have?
I have one.
Was that her daughter or her son at Dunwoody Prep at that time in 2009?
That was her daughter, Sophia.
Were you friends with her back in November of 2010?
We were becoming closer friends. She had actually come to my son's birthday party the spring before.
Okay. Had you had much contact with she and her husband as a couple?
No.
Let me direct your attention back to November the 19th of 2010. Did you have occasion to be at Dunwoody Prep at that time?
Yes.
Did you have, okay, I'm sorry. Did you have something to say other than yes?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay. And did you have occasion to come into contact with an individual by the name of Donna Formato at that time?
Yes.
Was there a conversation about the events of the preceding day as related by Ms. Formato?
Yes.
Could you tell us what Ms. Formato said?
Sure. I specifically went to Dunwoody Prep to give support to the teachers. I had been...
Just one second. Lawyers, approach for a minute.
I'm Jeff Hullinger along with Jay Strongwater, the fine attorney who has been joining us all day long. What's going on now, Jay?
There is something called a sidebar. The judge wants to talk to the attorneys about either the form of the question or the topic that they want to inquire into, and it's something that needs to be said without the jury hearing it, and he doesn't want to have the jury go back into the jury room. That takes too much time.
Here's a quick question from Verena, who says, when a witness speaks during a break with another witness while still being subpoenaed, does that have any consequences?
I think they impeached her on it. They brought it to light so the jury knows that the two witnesses spoke to each other. There's the rule of sequestration that says one witness should not talk to another witness until they're released.
From Israel, how would you grade the defense team job so far? I don't think they're doing a very good job, says Israel.
Time will tell. It looks like they're poking holes where they need to be poked and addressing the charges in general in a sweeping manner. And we'll have to find out what the jury thinks.
It's 2 minutes after 4 o'clock right now. Elizabeth Stansbury, that's who you're looking at right now. She had a child at Dunwoody Daycare in the fall of 2010. Friends with Andrea Sneiderman. Earlier today we heard from Tammy Parker, who is also a friend of Andrea, an attorney from Emory University now, working for a development firm in Atlanta. She was very strong on the stand today, very controlled, as you would expect from an attorney.
Yes.
Any other thoughts here as we roll into about the final hour of all of this?
Again, it looks like they're trying to confront the strong witnesses, Mr. Schneiderman and Ms. Citron, in trying to diffuse or actually just juxtapose these witnesses' recollection versus the witnesses that the state has called.
This is from Jonathan Holm in Bristol, United Kingdom. Hey, hello guys. I'm finding this case fascinating. Thanks for the excellent coverage. A lot of the charges Andrea Sneiderman faces are inextricably linked to others. Are the jury going to find it difficult to separate the issues? Because to me the state is going to have a problem in closing linking evidence to the charge. It seems like the defense rebuttal will be more straightforward.
Again, one of the problems with 13 counts is that jurors may compromise and say, well...
By compromises, what do you mean?
They may say, we've been here 3 weeks, I want to go home. I'm not sure about count 10. You're not sure about count 2. Why don't we just split the baby and take a count there of conviction and you get your count of not guilty.
Are deals like this always cut? Is that...
It's possible, and that's why I think the state brings multiple charges to almost invite a compromise verdict. And the problem in these cases is that the jury thinks they're doing the defendant a favor by limiting the number of convictions when in fact they're going to be, if they get convicted on one, they'll be sentenced as if they were convicted of all.
Judge Adams has had more to handle today. He's had to decide whether to throw out all of the charges, which he refused to do. He has had to take more of an active role on this day 7 of this trial.
Correct, because he was called upon by the lawyers to see how the case should move forward. The state rested. He had to make certain findings regarding the adequacy of the indictment itself, the charging document, and then he had to decide whether the state's evidence met the burden of proof to go forward. So
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So he had to make findings. Again, he had to go back through the 6 days of testimony, had to check the case law that the parties were citing to see whether which side was correct.
I've heard from our friend Blue Jay, who we have heard from over the last couple of weeks with always some interesting thoughts. And her question is this: is it just me, or is there a delay on this live stream? It is out of sync right now. We will look into that. We'll try to get you an answer on that to see if we're having any issues as it relates to 11alive.com or 11.2, which is our digital channel. But so far, Blue Jay, I don't think we're having any problems right now. You are the only one that we have heard from that is having some issues. So I apologize for that. Our director is Derek. He shakes his head. He says everything is cool, that we believe everything to be okay.
Again, what you can't see on the screen is the attorneys and the judge discussing either a point of law or point of fact and about how it should be addressed with this witness.
If you have any questions for Jay Strongwater and yours truly, easy to get a hold of me. I am on Twitter at 11 Hullinger, Hullinger, and my email is the initial J Hullinger at 11alive.com. And we have been handling a lot of questions today, and hopefully we have been able to answer many of these questions that you have had for us today. It is a very interesting trial. I know as we take breaks and I walk around a little bit in Decatur to get a cup of coffee or a cold beverage, I am surprised by the number of people, Jay, that come up to me and ask me about this trial, people that maybe you would not expect. It is a trial that when some people send us emails and say, wait a minute, this is not interesting, give me back my Weather Channel, the truth is we're getting a lot of people who are plugging into this, and having lived in Atlanta a long time, I mean, you get kind of a public sense of what catches people's fancy, and this is a case, even with the perjury, with the obstruction, without the murder charges, that has caught a lot of attention.
That's correct, and I don't think it's limited to a particular community. I think the background to these perjury charges got everybody's interest. I think at first they were shocked that someone would be shot outside a daycare center dropping off a child. As the facts developed, it became more and more enticing and interesting. And even without the murder charge, people want to see a conclusion to this. I think there's also strong opinions in the community, regardless of what they're seeing or hearing on TV.
Well, if you are just joining us and are plugging in for this final hour or so of testimony on this day 7 on this Tuesday, the major headline has been today that Andrea Sneiderman is weighing the possibility, as is her defense team, as to whether she is going to take the witness stand and will be part of the festivities. We will find that out in the next day or so. Back to the courtroom. So we are back up. I was checking out a couple of emails here, Jay. What did I miss?
Oh, you left it with the outstanding question is whether Andrea Sneiderman will agree, well,
that's right,
decide whether to testify. You can be sure that they're caucusing tonight to go over the testimony they were able to elicit from their friendly witnesses, talk to Andrea about what else needs to be said, and come to a group consensus about whether the case can be made with or without her testimony.
This is from Barbara Rea, and her question to you is this: should not... all right, we will get to Barbara's question when we come back.
Take a brief matter up. Just step into the jury room following the instructions of Deputy Garrett. Ma'am, just come down for a moment, please. Deputy Garrett, it'll be about 10 minutes.
All rise.
Okay, we are back once again. We had a little time to chat during a little bit of discussion in front of Judge Adams, and now the judge has decided to take a 10-minute break, so we'll kind of watch that. It's about 9 after 4, so we'll head back into the courtroom about 19 after. We were bringing up the name from my email account. Barbara Rea has sent a question for you, Jay.